Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our special show Perspective, where we bring you a detailed analysis of all key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the master plan for infrastructure development in India, and that is through PM Gatishakti. Now, infrastructure creation in India had suffered for decades from multiple issues such as lack of coordination between different departments. Now, this not only caused great inconvenience but also led to wasteful expenditure. Last few years have seen unprecedented focus on infrastructure projects. Now, a national master plan for multi-modal connectivity, that is PM Gatishakti, has been launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address the key issues of infrastructure development through institutionalizing holistic planning for stakeholders for major infrastructure projects. Now, instead of planning and designing separately in silos, the projects will now be designed and executed with a common vision. Now, the master plan will incorporate the infrastructure schemes of various ministries and state governments. It will also leverage technology extensively, including spatial planning tools with ISRO imagery. This move will enable all ministries and departments to visualize, review and monitor the progress of core sectoral projects through the GIS platform. It will also provide the public and business community information regarding upcoming connectivity projects, other business hubs, industrial areas and surrounding environment as well. We are joined by three distinguished panelists today to try and understand more about this particular master plan. And let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we have with me Sudhendu Jyoti Sinha here in the studios. He's advisor infrastructure connectivity with Niti Aayog. We're also joined by two more experts. Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, the editorial director of Business Standard, is also joining us. We have Dr. V.A. Nageshwaran with us. He's part-time member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Sansad TV. Let me begin with you, Mr. Sinha, and let's first start by understanding the scope of infrastructure projects in India. Where do we stand? What are we doing right now? What are the bottlenecks? What are the key hurdles which we're trying to tackle?
Thank you, Vishal. Infrastructure is something that is key to a nation's prosperity. Where good and the great nations are so, because they have got that inherent strength of the infrastructure. Now, in India, let me tell you, for the first time, the present dispensation, they have identified the infrastructure. Number one, they have put them, consolidated them, and then given a thrust to them. So, national infrastructure pipeline with infrastructural components, as many as 22 of them, out of which 17 are economic infrastructure and 5 of them are social infrastructure. All of them have been combined together. And the government thrust is to allocate more, to give a very, very focused approach and see to it that we are able to achieve them. You mentioned about the problems in the infrastructure. Some of the most fundamental problem is delays in time and cost overruns, leading to time and cost overruns. That is a fundamental challenge to infrastructure. Second challenge is with regard to, once you have set up an infrastructure, its maintainability has to be there. It must be maintained at the same level at which that infrastructure was conceived, set up de novo. And finally, it must be a resilient infrastructure. So in the event of any problem, any kind of letdown, it must bounce back to its original position, to its original status as fast as possible. So these are the primary problems. And of course, one more problem is, let me tell you that there is a system of review of critical infrastructure. That Honorable Prime Minister does it personally. And that is done on a monthly basis.
Through the Pragati platform.
Exactly, through the Pragati platform, you rightly identified it. And there he could see that there are definite reasons that are leading to delays and leading to time and cost overruns. And one of the reasons that he could identify was, and rightly so, that the systems are working in silos. And to break down that silos, the concept of Gatishakti is there.
Okay,
so that is the kind of origin.
Okay, that pretty much, sets the stage for us to understand how Gatishakti will work, or what are the areas where Gatishakti will take care of the issues or the hurdles, the problems you mentioned, Mr. Sinha. Let me bring in the other two panelists here as well. Let me start with you, Dr. Nageshwaran, and let's start by, taking this thread forward, which Mr. Sinha has put in place in terms of understanding what is it that we need to tackle. We first need to identify the problems. Looks like the major problems are that most of the departments work in silos, then there are cost overruns, and then it's not just about the profitability of the infrastructure project, but maintainability of the infrastructure project is very crucial.
Absolutely. I think he has touched upon all the relevant dimensions of this initiative. Obviously, the very idea of trying to break down silos between ministries and departments is key to implementation, because all of us mentioned that execution is critical, and that is like, that's a motherhood and apple pie kind of statement. Execution is critical to any initiative at all levels of the government. So at one level, this Gatishakti initiative, which coordinates across ministries and departments, is a very welcome initiative. What needs to happen at the next step for us to ensure that the chances of success become much higher is to make sure that at the implementation level with the state governments and the local governments also, there is coordination and there is sort of a mutual accommodation and understanding. So that is the next step that needs to happen. So what we have seen so far is the bridging of one important execution gap, which is coordination across ministries. But the next step that needs to happen is coordination with state governments and even up to the local government level.
Okay. Mr. Bhattacharya, your views there on, the Gatishakti master plan when we're talking about the key aspects. It is said that there are 6 key elements of this master plan, and those elements will deal with all the issues which are being highlighted by Mr. Sinha and Dr. Nageshwaran here.
Well, I think both Mr. Sinha and Mr. Nageshwaran have touched the right buttons, in my view. Mr. Sinha talked about the maintainability aspect, which is a big challenge. We know from the Gatishakti package that it will try to break the silos that exist within the different central ministries that undertake these projects. And Mr. Nageshwaran has taken the pitch forward by saying that it is important to get the states on board, because after all, the projects will not be executed in vacuum, but these projects will be executed on the ground and the local level. Even the local governments need to be involved in it, so that it is actually a reflection of the government's belief in cooperative federalism, where the states, the local governments, and the center come together. But the third element, in my view, which is very important, is the maintainability of these projects, because by creating the projects, we are meeting an infrastructure gap or an infrastructure deficit. But if we do not ensure that the framework for maintaining them also exists, then I think we'll be failing in our in achieving the targets that underlie those projects.
Okay.
For example, if we are looking at setting up new renewable projects, it is important that the policy framework underlying in what way the renewable power projects need to evacuate its power, their power for distribution to the consumers, that need to be fixed. So therefore, projects is the first stage. I think the Gatishakti addresses this issue about creating the hardware very well, but if I may use somebody else's expression, it needs to go beyond by developing an equally robust software, the policy framework by which these projects become maintainable, to quote Mr. Sinha.
Okay. We'll come to that part as well, and how technology is also being used. But first, coming to that aspect which both Mr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Nageshwaran is pointing out, Mr. Sinha, and that is the involvement of other tiers of government, state governments, local bodies, because when we're talking about implementation of projects, these projects are implemented in various parts of the country, and the involvement of the state departments, the departments of the state government and the urban local bodies there, and gram panchayats also becomes really crucial. So everybody will have to be on the same footing.
Yes, I fully agree to that. And that is the reason why in this Gatishakti, this is something that is embedded into it. The 6 pillars that you mentioned, 2 of them are analytical, and one is analysis, and second is dynamic. So the entire data set, the entire information keeps on updating on a kind of real-time basis. And the most, I would say, call it essential part, most striking part of this particular Gatishakti thing is that it is very, very transparent. So not only the departments, the people, regardless of the level of the department, even their different layers, different governments, the people at large, the investors, everybody would come to know that what exactly is happening in a particular area, in a particular stream of infrastructure. And then, for example, an investor, he should be able to know that whether he should be going in for investment or not. For a state government, they should be understanding whether how they could contribute in the monitoring part, and if they have to add on to an infrastructure, what precisely they should be going in for that. So what I'm trying to say is that this sort of transparency is innate, it is inbuilt in that entire paradigm of Gatishakti.
Okay, and what about the technology part? Because use of spatial technology, Mr. Sinha, that seems to be bringing that extra element which is required to ensure that not only the transparency is maintained, but those silos are broken, which is the basic main aim of such a plan.
Precisely. So that as far as technology is concerned, it is the most upscale technology that has been brought into it. So it is kind of satellite imagery based, geospatial, you have already mentioned about it. So these are the kind of new technology paradigms that have been embedded, that have been placed into it, so that cross-sectoral information can flow in and the decisions are taken on across the board. I mean, it is not a kind of, say, a particular silo is taking decision. What is happening is today is that suppose from point A to B, you decide, a particular ministry decides that we will go in for roads. They do not know what exactly other projects are going on, what precisely is their timelines, when will they be completed. Now with this Gatishakti in position, it will be absolutely transparent. You will come to know of it, that this is precisely is going to take place, and accordingly you can say, you can adjust and accommodate your own plans.
Okay, Dr. Nageshwaran, how do you think the technology part would add more value to this initiative? Because we're not only talking about planning and design, we're also talking about keeping it transparent, letting people know, letting the departments obviously know that what the other department is working on, but the general public, the business investors, them also, for them to be aware as to what's happening in an area.
No, I think Mr. Bhattacharya talked about the software of implementation, and immediately right on cue, Mr. Sinha explained the information transparency of this entire Gatishakti initiative. The very fact that a higher profile is being given and silos are breaking down, it's important. And what Mr. Sinha explained brought us, visions of in the earlier days, somebody would have laid a new tar road, and then within a week, the telecom department would come and dig it up, and then they will close it. And then the electricity cable guy will come and dig it up, and then the water mains will come and, so they will keep digging the same road from 3 to 4 times, undermining the entire initial laying of the road. Now, what he explained tells you that at a given time before you commence work, you will know what is going on. That transparency basically bridges the information asymmetry. And clearly technology today is available that if you can present it in one single dashboard before a new initiative happens, then obviously that is going to make the chances of success go up, and timely implementation will also improve. But once again, coming back to the software aspects of it, clearly a lot of thought has gone into it in terms of the information dashboard and coordination, etc. Ultimately, what is also important is when it comes to dispute resolution, interpretation of rules has to be consistent across ministries, across projects, across states. And so that is where the next step will come to. We will come to in terms of the software of success is all about consistency of interpretation, implementation, etc.
Okay, Mr. Bhattacharya, we have discussed this quite a number of times, and all of us are aware of this important fact as well, that infrastructure is very key to our economy's further development. A lot of money is being spent on it, a lot of projects, and they not only have monetary value, they have a lot of social value as well. Those infrastructure projects do add a lot of value to the living standards in both urban areas and rural areas also. The question I'm asking here is that initiatives like PM Gatishakti, how do you think they will add value in the given time frame we have, and sort of, race against the time that we have to ensure that the infrastructure projects are completed in time?
Well, the very fact that, an initiative of this nature has been unveiled at the level of the Prime Minister shows the kind of importance that this entire project will, in the normal course, acquire. That will instill a lot of confidence in the various stakeholders in the system. As I said earlier, that the key would be, one, the implementation, two, its maintainability, and three, what kind of policy framework you want to create these new assets. Now, there are various models that are available. There are public-private partnership models available. There are also private ownership models that are available. Now, it is very important to make sure that the Gatishakti project does not remain a preserve of only the public sector projects, but it should be actually a preserve of any enterprise that wants to operate in this country, so that there is competition, and competition yields its natural benefits in terms of better price discoveries and better services, and the customer ultimately benefits. So I think we have to first acknowledge that Gatishakti pitches this entire idea of infrastructure projects to a new level, and that is to be unequivocally welcome. But the fruits of this initiative should flow down to each stakeholder in the system, and that is very important if we want to achieve the goals that are set out by the Prime Minister in this initiative.
Okay. Dr. Nageshwaran, you earlier in your first response, you spoke about how we have to look at the next level as well, involvement of state governments and, other tiers of government also. But from your, point of view, if we have to understand what more needs to be done, initiatives like PM Gatishakti are very crucial, very important, and they do take care of, take a holistic view of all the problems which are there vis-a-vis implementation of infrastructure projects. But as Mr. Bhattacharya is pointing out, we will have to take a few more steps here on.
Sure. No, I think Mr. Bhattacharya touched upon an important point which I wanted to make earlier, but I'm glad that he made it, which is that by having it launched by the Prime Minister, it does send a signal already to the outside world about the importance being given to it. So it raises the profile of the entire initiative. That is one, which is important, which is a very first step towards ensuring its implementation and success. And then he also touched upon the importance of the involvement of the private sector while I talked about the state and local governments. Obviously, the next thing is to tie up funding for each of these initiatives, which is the most important requirement for success. And that is where a clarity of thinking on who gets to bear the risk when you involve private sector or public-private partnership, and in what manner, whether it's through revenue sharing or whether it is through upfront investment. So who bears the upstream risk and who bears the downstream risk, and who gets to bear the losses when things go, in case things go wrong or delayed. All these things are good to be thought through and clarity arrived at before implementation begins, because if we deal with them in an ad hoc manner, then what will happen is there won't be a consistency across different projects, and that will lead to litigation and further delays, etc. So the next step is not only to determine funding, but also to ensure risk allocation, risk bearing between upstream and downstream initiatives. And the third thing is to have these frameworks in place before execution commences.
Okay. That explains a lot of things which need to be done. But taking it from there, Mr. Sinha, would you agree with both Mr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Nageshwaran here that in terms of taking those few more steps to ensure that initiatives like PM Gatishakti are implemented properly on the ground also involves the private sector, the other stakeholders as well? They will have to be given that much due weightage in the entire scope of framework there.
Yes, that is there. In fact, let me tell you that the Gatishakti is basically for them also. It is not that it is for the, it is to the kind of to to the government to the exclusion of them. No. The big idea is that how to take the population of India, the general citizens of India, into a very, very aspirational stage of ease of living and ease of doing business. So therefore, what I am trying to tell you is that yes, as far as sharing of information is concerned, I believe that is something inbuilt into it, and they will definitely have a role to play in taking this Gatishakti forward.
Okay.
With upscale of technology already there, it will definitely be a grand success. And the very fact that it is coming from none other than the highest, our Prime Minister of India, and that too after a lot of experience that he has gathered over a period of time in the evaluation and monitoring of the projects. So he knows it all the well how to take it forward, and we are there to kind of take it forward. Yes.
Okay. So in terms of and a quick concluding round of comments from all three of you. Let me start with you, Dr. Nageshwaran. When we are looking at the present scope, when we are looking at these policy initiatives, and when we are looking at the need for a hard push to the infra projects, how do you see things moving ahead from here onwards in the short term and in the long term as well?
No, I'm confident that given the state of the world and India's resilience and the impressive bounce back from the second wave, etc., and also the purposeful reforms that have been unleashed in the last few months, starting from the retrospective taxation amendments and then the telecom sector package and now the privatization of Air India, there are visible results, and therefore there will be greater enthusiasm on the part of the private sector to participate. And between the three of us, we have agreed on the fact that the PM has launched it, giving it a profile. It takes care of coordination. It takes care of information asymmetry. Also, so there are several improvements already. So I would give it a very high chance of success given the building blocks are in place. And I also feel given the global financing conditions, if there is transparency and consistency, funding will also become available more easily than before. Back to you.
Okay, Mr. Bhattacharya, your concluding comments on the way forward when we are looking at the infrastructure connectivity project specifically with these policy tweaks in place.
Well, I think we should not underestimate the importance of the monetizability of this project, because while we are looking for resources and funding, we should all remember that all these projects are actually extremely monetizable, and a package should be put in place so that these projects can be monetized and less dependence on the central exchequer's resources are resorted to, so that the government's resources can be used far more effectively and far more usefully in other social welfare schemes.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhattacharya, Dr. Nageshwaran, as well as Mr. Sinha, for sharing your views and insight with our viewers. As our experts were pointing out, the PM Gatishakti initiative, that is the master plan for giving a push to multi-modal infrastructure connectivity projects, obviously will have a lot of impact on how the projects are designed and implemented both, but there are a lot of efforts which will have to be put in by all stakeholders, including the state governments and other tiers, local tiers of government as well. We'll come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.